Sunday was a very embarrassing loss for the Chargers, and I know it's tough for Chargers fans out there right now, but the Chargers' playoff chances are still very much alive.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade. Joined as always my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers for over 5 seasons. We started doing our own Facebook Live show, Chargers Domination Live, and now this is our 4th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. What is up, guys? Welcome into the show. We have a lot to get into today, but first, let me just thank everyone for coming in and making us your first listen today. We very much appreciate it. We really, appreciated everyone's support. A lot of downloads on this last episode, even after such a tough loss. And like I told you guys yesterday, that means a lot to us, knowing how tough it is sometimes, especially with this Chargers team. But if you haven't already, make sure to go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel. Follow the show for free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcast from. But some news today, David, good news and bad news. I think we are all expecting a wave of COVID roundup to hit after the game, because that's kind of been happening. Like Monday has just been like Black Monday every week. It seems like, they're just names getting piled onto the list, especially with the names the Chargers already had on there. But we're going to start with the playoff chances, because really for the Chargers, it's going to come down to 2 teams. It's going to come down to the Dolphins, and if they can win out, in the Ravens, and if they can win out. Plus, all pretty much based on the Chargers winning out. And do we have confidence in that right now after the performance last weekend? And with all the names, uncertainty in the air, especially with some unvaxxed guys going on the list today that we know aren't going to play in the final game. And Brandon Staley got to open up a little bit more today in his press conference about the loss last night. And I thought there were some very interesting things. I think he called out the effort of his defense really in this game, and really called them out and said they didn't do anything well, which he kind of said yesterday too. But there's also some stuff about Justin Herbert and the interceptions, trying to figure out how much I agree with that, and just the trying to have all the moving parts on the back end and keep that a solid secondary, which the Chargers have had really a lot of trouble with lately. But as far as the playoff chances go, David, for the Chargers, I mean, it's pretty simple for me, at least. I mean, the Chargers obviously have to win out. If you look at the New York Times predictions right now, what it's going to say is that the Chargers have a 37% chance to make the playoffs. That's with all of the games left on the table. The Chargers' chances took a little bit of a hit tonight with the Dolphins beating up on a COVID-ravaged Saints team with Ian Book starting for them. That helps their chances. But I think the good news is, David, is that these teams have some very difficult games on their schedule, which keeps the Chargers very much alive, because if each one loses one of their last 2 games, the Chargers can make it if they win all of their games, because those teams wouldn't get to 10 wins, right? That's the simplest way to put it. The Chargers could get to 10. Those other teams could not. So with this for the Chargers, I think looking at specifically at the Ravens first, I mean, the Lamar Jackson situation has been wild. He's been out a lot, right? And he's been ill in other weeks where he's been questionable, even with the Chargers, right? He was illness, wasn't practicing that week even before he ended up playing, but that's still very much in the air. The latest is that they think he's going to play, but they're playing the Rams. It is a home game, but the Rams seem to be getting hot at the right time, and I think that gives you a little glimmer of hope, whether you think the Chargers deserve to be in or not. I mean, if they make it, they deserve it. What they do after that is really going to be what decides this season and the success of it. But you have a realistic chance that the Ravens could drop that game, and if not, they still have a game against the Steelers, which is a divisional game.
Yeah, for sure. I think looking at those 2 games, the Rams are one of the better teams in the league, and the NFC for sure. And they still have a lot to fight for too. I mean, they have a chance at a first-round bye, so they're not going to be resting anybody. I mean, this game is important to them. It's worth it. It's definitely beneficial for them to go out there and put their really put their best on the football field and win this game. So I like the Rams in that one. Obviously, I'm a little bit hopeful, but yeah, I mean, of the 2 games, the Steelers game, you never know. Those are physical matchups. We know about those division games, right? I mean, anytime the Chargers play any of their division opponents, it's always physical, because those are the teams that know you the best. So, I mean, it's going to be an interesting matchup, but you got to hope the Rams are going to be able to pull one out. And obviously, none of that matters if you don't handle your own business first.
Yeah, and we'll get into that, but I think on the other side of things with the Dolphins, they're a peculiar case just because they're the only team now in NFL history that's lost 7 games in a row and then won 7 games in a row. So they're hot. The teams they've been playing have not been good. They do have a good, Ravens win on that resume with Lamar Jackson. That was solid for sure. But
Yeah.
still, I mean, they've definitely been fortunate with their schedule, especially playing, beating up on the weaker teams in the AFC East. But I think that they also are going to face a tough schedule and have a tough time pulling out both the wins to end their season, because they have some teams on their schedule with a lot to play for too, because first they're taking on the Tennessee Titans, who just beat the San Francisco 49ers. As beat up as they are, they just beat a team that's been surging in the NFC. Now they play the Titans this week, who have a lot to play for, with the Indianapolis Colts right on their heels, right? Indianapolis. I don't know why I said that so weird. But they also, after that, I mean, they still have another tough game against the Patriots. And the Patriots will have a lot to play for as well on the top of that division, because now the Buffalo Bills have taken the lead in that, and they'll have to play out through the rest of the season and hope that the Bills drop one along the way. And that could be somewhat of a revenge game for the Patriots. So that's why it does still feel very much alive, just because you just heard the schedule of who these two teams have to play. They're going to have to lose 2 of those games. And with the way those teams are playing, even without Derrick Henry and all of the other, circumstances with that, the Patriots even losing to the Bills, they're still a better team than they were the last time they played the Dolphins in week 1. So there's still a chance there.
Yeah, there's definitely a chance. And I think the one thing, when you look at these two opponents for the Dolphins, both of these teams are very, very well-coached teams. I think Mike Vrabel, as a head coach in Tennessee, he's done wonders to turn around that organization, and they've been perennial playoff teams pretty much every year that he's been there. So you got to give him credit for his tutelage of that team. And then obviously, what the Patriots bring to the table. I mean, the hardware speaks for itself. The jewelry speaks for itself with Bill Belichick. You know what he's capable of doing. He's going to take away what you do best. He's going to be very, very frustrating to play against, because that's what good coaches are. I mean, they're going to frustrate you and make it a very uncomfortable matchup, and you're going to have to outduel him. And obviously, for me, in any matchup, my money is always with Bill Belichick. So those are a couple of really tough teams, really tough games that are also very, very important for those two opponents that the Dolphins are going to be playing.
Exactly, and that's why the Chargers kind of, still have a nice path laid out in front of them, but you still do need help. You still need other teams not to get to 10 wins, and you have to get to 10 wins yourself, because I told you, they said 37% chance for the Chargers right now. That's because you don't know the results of those games, and you also don't know the results of the Chargers games, right? Because these are all based on the Chargers winning those last 2 games. If they can win those, sweep the Raiders and the Broncos in, inverse order, then they have a 79% chance to make the playoffs. So it seems so far, and especially according to this predictor. And I think that's just the biggest thing, though, is can you trust this team right now, David, from what we've seen last weekend, to go and win out with them, do what they have to do?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I don't think you can have any kind of confidence after that performance, and how just this season has gone for the Chargers. It's been so ping-pongish. It's just been up and down and up and down and up and down. There has been no significant winning streaks where you're like, man, they're clicking on all cylinders, and they're able to carry that over from week to week, game to game. We just haven't seen a lot of consistency from that perspective, and the defense has been really bad. I think the offense has been fairly good this season, but they haven't been able to put it together to where they've played well enough for them to really get on a roll. And that's what's been so frustrating for me, and I'm sure for a lot of Charger fans, is that you see a lot of talent, you see a lot of ability, and I think you really believe in the coaching staff for the most part, and it's just really frustrating that they're not able to put it together on a consistent basis.
Right. I mean, consistency has always been the name of the game, because, I mean, let's not forget that this team has beat good teams so far this season. They have good wins on their resume. It's not like they've, every good team they've gone up against, they've wilted, right? They have those, resume builders on their record, including taking out 3 out of the 4 teams in the AFC North. So I think that they have shown that they can be a good team on occasion. And I think you just saw last week, I mean, it was just not having that energy with Brandon Staley talks about at the end of the show, and obviously everything to do with the COVID situation. And the Chargers had some more names put on that list that we have to get into, and a couple of guys that, since they're unvaxxed, are not going to be able to play in this upcoming game. And hopefully, the Chargers will start getting more guys back, because Austin Ekeler did get activated off of the list this week already. So we'll get into that coming up right after this. All right, so more COVID news. Stop me if you've heard this before.
Yay!
I mean, every day. I mean, every single day it seems like, even game day was Michael Davis. Like day before that was Justin Jones. a wave on Mondays. And I mean, I think there was 106 players put on the COVID reserve list throughout the
like
NFL this week.
450 in the month of December. Like, just absolutely insane the amount of people that are being affected by this COVID-19 virus right now. It's insane.
Yeah, exactly. And the Chargers also had to place more players on the list while not getting as many back as you would like. But now at this point, David, we know that Mike Williams, Nazir Adderley, and Chris Harris Jr. have officially been ruled out of the game next weekend. And that's kind of how you're sussing out who of these guys has been vaxxed, right? Just because it's like, you know, if they're getting automatically ruled out, like they're not specifically saying that they're unvaxxed. But I mean, it's just hard to say, David. I mean, yeah, you just know, because the rest of the guys have a chance to play.
Right.
And the Chargers can still get some of those guys back. But that's what's so tough about this is, like, even if they test positive and they were vaxxed, there's a chance they don't play. But you know that with certainty just because of that decision, like, it is hurting the football team. Whether or not you think it's the right thing to do or not, I'm not even getting into that at all. But at this point, it is hurting the team when you know these guys aren't going to be able to play because of that decision.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're not here to be the COVID police or you know, police their personal decisions on what they believe. That is everyone's right as an American. So obviously we're not going to get into that aspect of it, but there's no question that it hurts the football team. I mean, the availability, I mean, that's key. If you can't go out there and play, you can't help the football team. And the secondary is ravaged. I mean, they are going to be out there with a couple of players. Hopefully Derwin's back. If Derwin's not there, it's an absolute travesty. I mean, it's going to be really difficult if they're not able to have him back there, because you know you're not having Chris Harris. You know Michael Davis is probably not going to be out there. You don't know. He's not ruled out yet, but we haven't seen anybody play that's been placed on the list that next week. And then Alohi Gilman was put on the list. I mean, they are hurting bad. So I would expect the Chargers to definitely look for some guys to sign. They got to add some bodies because they're dropping quick.
It's just more moving parts, and with the uncertainty of not knowing which guys are going to come back, like, you really don't know how to feel about them going up this weekend against a team that's already beat them, you know? So, like, that's just such a tough thing to try to think about right now until you start getting some guys back, which they did. But you know now Nazir Adderley and Chris Harris Jr. aren't going to be out there. You don't know about Derwin James. Alohi Gilman hasn't been officially ruled out for this one, but like I've said in the past weeks, like, even with the lenient protocols coming into play last week, we haven't seen a player test positive, vaxxed or not, and still play in the upcoming game, right? They might miss less than 10 days, which is what happens if you're unvaxxed, but we haven't seen them come back for a game. So that's super troubling when you think about the names that are on there right now and continuing to go on there, like an Alohi Gilman, right? So that's 3 of your safeties that could be out, your top 3 safeties, and Alohi Gilman had a rough week. That's your 3rd best guy right now. And you know Nazir Adderley's out, and you don't know about Derwin James. Like, that's a very, startling proposition. I mean, you obviously will hope to get some guys back. You hope Joey Bosa can come back this week. You hope Chris Rumpf can come back this week as a vax player too, right? And these guys aren't necessarily out 10 days. They just need the negative test. But the CDC is changing guidelines. We can see some things potentially change because of the, quarantine time going from 14 days to 7 days or 5 days, 10 days to 5 days this week. So we'll see if the NFL kind of responds to that. But we did see some good news there as well, though, David, because we did see that the Chargers did activate Austin Ekeler, Tavon Campbell, and Joe Gaziano from the COVID list. So at least some of these guys are starting to come back because they also need to get back and get there for the game plan, which a lot of these guys have missed so much of.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's nice for these guys to probably get some, time off of their feet and let their bodies heal because, they've been playing through the rigors of an NFL season, for 15 weeks now. So it's been tough. So that's the only positive that you can look at it. But yeah, I mean, these guys got to get into practice. They got to get comfortable with the game plan. Obviously they need to get more focused because that last game plan, that was not it. They didn't know how to execute it. They did not go out there and play well. But getting a Joe Gaziano back on the interior defensive line, I think he's a guy who's really been kind of a bright spot. I mean, he's really came out of nowhere from training camp, and I thought he's really worked himself into a nice rotational piece and a guy who's really helped you as a little bit of a pass rusher, but more so against the run. And that's one thing that was a glaring hole against the Texans. They need to get him back. Hopefully they can get Justin Jones back too. That was another obvious deficiency. That guy is such a difference maker, and you really see it when he's not out there. But good to get Tavon Campbell back. I mean, that's going to help. But obviously the big name on here is Austin Ekeler without question. We know how important that guy is, his 17 touchdowns, the safety blanket for Justin Herbert. I mean, just a very physical runner. Hopefully this was beneficial for the ankle. Hopefully he's back out of practice 100% and doing what Austin Ekeler does.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if you can, stack that with the impressive performances that we've seen from Justin Jackson the last few games, like he's looked as good as he's looked in his time with the Chargers over the last few weeks. And that's one of those things where you can have Austin Ekeler back, obviously a little bit fresher, hopefully, especially for him with all the touches. He's a guy that could definitely use a week off and all that. But like at the same time, it doesn't mean anything if you don't make the playoffs, right? Like
right.
You have plenty of time to rest if you don't make the playoffs. So you need all these guys back as soon as possible. And I mean, I think if you see the game plan defensively last week, it didn't seem like those guys were on the field enough getting through that, right? So whether that's just guys, who are starters, now they are out, so now you're putting in the next guy, but it's a few days late and a few days closer to the next day, so it's not as much time. But either way, like this has totally changed the outlook of the Chargers season, especially depending on what happens this week. But having Joe Gaziano back is big. Having Austin Ekeler back is big. And I think more importantly, like I said, I mean, it's Chris Rumph, it's Joey Bosa. We'll see about Michael Davis because he would be the guy who would be pushing it because we haven't seen a guy test positive on game day, right? So starting the timeline from there, we've seen guys test positive on the Monday after that have all not played in the next game. But getting Corey Linsley back, getting some of these other guys like Joey Bosa, potentially Derwin James, like that'll all make a huge difference because we saw what this defense looked like without him.
Oh, my goodness. It's unbelievable. There was no pass rush at all in that game. I mean, you know how important Joey Bosa is, but it's not just his pass rush ability. It's his ability to set that physical edge and really be a phenomenal run stuffer too. I mean, he's a leader at that line of scrimmage. There's no one that has that kind of impact. There's nobody that brings that level of physicality, that technique, that ability. I mean, Joey Bosa is the total package, and he is sorely missed in this game. Obviously, Derwin James was active for the game, but he didn't have a helmet the entire time.
No,
he was sitting there in
just
shoulder
because
pads.
they didn't have anybody left.
Right.
Basically.
They couldn't make anyone inactive, but that's as inactive as you're going to be as an active status. But
same with Michael Davis.
Yeah, obviously with Michael Davis.
Obviously something different, but yeah.
That's different. Thing. Yeah, for sure. But with Derwin James, hopefully he's had enough time to let the hamstring heal. They need him desperately in this game. This is obviously a must-win game, and he's got to be back there to kind of clean up some of the deficiencies that are going to be the guys that are playing next to him. But that's what superstars do, and that's what Derwin James is capable of.
Yeah, I mean, he changes everything on the back end. I mean, I think that one of the things you've seen the last 3 weeks is just moments where the Chargers are giving things up way too easily through the air. And I think a lot of that changes with Derwin James healthy out there, right? I mean, it's hard to even count him out there for the Kansas City game just because he had to miss so many snaps.
Yeah.
And was clearly limited. So, like, it's so important for him to be out there. And I mean, we know this Chargers defense isn't, supremely talented, or at least is, top heavy. And you saw that a lot last week with those other guys that had to sub in, but looking like another desperate situation this weekend, unfortunately. And Brandon Staley, talked about how it's been difficult to kind of play with these moving parts. Obviously, they've been one of the worst defenses in the NFL this season. And a lot of that potentially has to do with guys just being on and off the field, getting hit by COVID even harder than they did last year, really. And I mean, more circumstances. So do you give him the benefit of the doubt for now, right? But he did have some interesting comments about that, the effort of his players, and Justin Herbert continuing to kind of prop him up. I want to see what you think about that, and we'll get into that coming up right after this. But first, I need to tell you guys about the official betting sponsor of the Locked On Chargers podcast, BetOnline.ag. And BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the college bowl season and the pro football playoffs. And guys, playoffs are coming up. Hopefully the Chargers can make a run here, but it's bowl season as well, and this is one of the best times of the year to bet on playoff games and to bet on any kind of football games, especially when it seems like you have football pretty much every day. So you can almost always find some action. And the only place I go is betonline.ag. Right now, we can even give you guys some free money to play with them, because if you head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today, you can receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit, and just use the promo code LOCKEDON to get that 50% welcome bonus. That's promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, one word, to receive your bonus from football, basketball, NHL, boxing, and UFC right to your favorite Vegas casino games. There's definitely some UFC cards coming up in January, UFC 270, which is going to be a lot of fun to bet on with a heavyweight championship on the line. But they have everything that you're looking for, and they're the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. So don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing deals they have going on right now. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, David. Well, it's time to get into Brandon Staley's press conferences, and it sucks always when they do it on Monday because you never know if you're going to get, any access to it. But luckily, the Chargers put out a transcript of what Brandon Staley had to say, and it was interesting comments from him on this one. So I'm glad that they did, because I think we start with the effort, David, because that was something that you had picked up on as well. Certainly when you're missing tackles and looking the way they did in the running game, I mean, not having Joe Gaziano and specifically Justin Jones obviously hurts you in that game, right, as far as stopping the run. But one of those things, one of the things those guys bring to the table is just their energy that they bring. Their willingness to be sturdy at the point of attack. And I think that was something that was missed. But Brandon Staley got as close as you will hear him basically to kind of calling out his defense. And I think, it was refreshing to hear. He said, I don't think we had our edge of the game yesterday. I don't think we had our edge of the game. When you look at the film, when we were in a lot of 8-man fronts, we knew exactly the type of runs we were going to be deployed by that team. That's what they did. We were in a lot of run structures that are designed to take it away, but it comes down to technique, attitude, and playing together, playing with that intensity, that energy the game requires, that it demands regardless of who you're playing. I mean, that pretty much says it right there, David, like how he felt about that performance. And when you give up that much specifically to a guy like Rex Burkhead, I think it's fair. And I am glad that he's willing to come out here, kind of put his name on that and kind of send a message to his team.
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much explicitly said that no level of the defense performed well in this game. They said nothing that they did was acceptable. They did not perform well. And yeah, that's something that was very clear to me, was the lack of effort, the lack of energy. It just didn't seem like anybody was exploding off the ball and really trying to get after it. I mean, that was something that in football, you have to have that aggression. You got to have that motivation. You got to have that energy and effort level. You got to have that Joey Bosa motor. I mean, that guy does not stop.
You definitely need more of those guys for sure. I mean, like you talked about the pressure, 3 pressures yesterday on 28 dropbacks.
So unacceptable. It's unacceptable. You have to be able to manufacture a pass rush when Joey Bosa's not out there, and he's not going to be there. And obviously, that Uchenna Nwosu is the next best guy, and they're going to do everything they can to take him out of the game. So what else are you going to do? You got to be able to bring pressure in other ways, and we didn't really see that in this game. But the effort level was something that was so apparent, and they have to get that corrected, because if they go into this Broncos game playing like that, they're going to get whooped.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that, early in the season, it was all run defense. And then we saw it be kind of more the pass defense that was getting shredded, when really it was kind of a combination of neither one being very good. The pass numbers look good when teams are running the ball at will. And then the running numbers look good, when teams, and vice versa, basically. So it was nice to hear him say that. I mean, obviously, that's a very simple answer. And I mean, maybe there is more to just his scheme, but he's telling you he was stacking the box and the guys just weren't making the plays. He specifically brought up Amen Agbagbamiga having a 5-yard tackle for loss where, they end up giving up a 36-yard run. He also talked about getting beat by double moves at the end of the half. Really roasted Devontae Harris in a way by saying, how are we giving up a touchdown on a 9 route when you're playing off coverage with no time left in the half? That's beginner stuff that you're not giving up those plays. I mean, you have to make a team like that earn it. And Davis Mills had some nice throw, but he brought up the penalties as well. But I just thought that was refreshing to kind of hear him talk about that and really call out some of his players. And I thought that Chris Harris Jr. brought it up as well. And, Brandon Staley said that it has been hard for the team to play with all the moving parts. And that's the one thing we've seen throughout the season, David, is different members of the secondary, even the defensive front, going out at different times, and how much they've struggled to deal with that.
Yeah, they said they have had a really hard time getting some continuity on the backside, and you haven't had your starting safeties out there at once as much as you want to. You want to have Derwin James and Nas out there as much as possible, and there's just been way too many games where that hasn't been the case. You haven't been able to deploy that. You haven't had your top corners at times. Michael Davis has missed time. Asante Samuel Jr. has missed time. Obviously, Tavon Campbell was on the COVID list, and they just don't have a lot of depth behind those guys anyway. Mark Webb has not been out there. He's been
injured.
So
thank God Mark Davis isn't out there.
Yeah, thank God. I'm so sorry, Mark Webb. But yes, they haven't been able to really have a set amount of guys that they felt comfortable that were going to be able to go out there and provide the level of play that you're looking for, and some backups and rotations. You just haven't seen that. They've had to roll with the punches and really try to figure out the right combinations. And Brandon Staley basically said, we're still trying to figure that out right now.
Yeah, he did. And I mean, that's not an excuse. I mean, that's just the facts. Like, they maybe should have done a better job. And I would agree with that. And like, it doesn't excuse the performances, right?
Oh, no.
But when you're looking at it, I mean, all the games Asante Samuel Jr. has missed. Jaron James has missed now. Nazir Adderley, Chris Harris Jr., Michael Davis, Justin Jones. All those guys have missed at least 3 games or are going to miss the next game, making it 3 games, So, like, it is something that's definitely affected them. And, like, I don't think it hit the Rams that hard in that way where it's just a constant in and out in the lineup. You had more connectivity with guys back there with Jalen Ramsey, John Jefferson, and the guys they had playing for them. I don't think that they dealt with as much. And I just think that it deserves some benefit of the doubt, especially when there's realistic questions about the personnel. But I do want to talk about what he had to say about Justin Herbert's 2 interceptions in the game. He said that neither one of them was poor decision-making, which I think in the second part for the pick 6 kind of calls out Jared Cook. I don't know how you interpreted that. Yeah. But like that was saying, it wasn't on him. The Josh Palmer one, it's hard to say that one was a good decision, but he's been unwavering. I mean, even in this game, he says he played very well yesterday. We're going to continue to trust him. He's playing at a high level, the highest level in the league. And I mean, a lot of it was in garbage time, but it's still, the highest yards per attempt he had this season. Like, he did do some nice things, over 70% completion percentage. But those 2 big things kind of stained what could have been a better day, especially if the Chargers hadn't set up for as many field goals, which he said, kind of cost them as well.
Well, and the reason why I have an issue with the first interception is because it was first down. You didn't have to take that shot in that situation, and there was clearly double coverage. I mean, it was there was outside the guy inside and a guy above him.
Well, and I like the decision to take a shot there. It's just if it's not there, go to the next thing.
Yeah. Keep possession of the football. So that one I have a little bit of issue with just because of where they were on the football field and the down and distance that they were dealing with at the time. The second one, I definitely blame Jared Cook a little bit more on that one because we've seen numerous examples of him kind of quitting on routes. And the decision, why are you throwing behind the sticks in that situation? I mean, I don't really know about that. But
I mean, it wasn't a third down or anything, but it was just like you weren't going to get much out of it to try to squeeze something into a window there.
And it was just another double coverage situation. You didn't really need to throw.
Maybe triple cover. There was 3 guys in the area.
Yeah, but like I said, that's a third time we've seen Jared Cook quit on a route and it turned into an interception. This one turned into a pick 6. You just can't have that. I mean, a guy that's been in the league this many years should know better than to quit on a route. You got to go out there and get the football or prevent the interception. You got to do something. That can't happen going forward.
Yeah, and like I don't even want to roast Jared Cook because I mean there's definitely something there for sure, and I mean hopefully the coaches are telling them that, but like I guess there is a reason kind of to all these teams letting him go, even though you look at just the raw numbers and he's been one of the more productive tight ends, especially in the red zone, scoring touchdowns and things like that. But it's just been the little things. I mean, the key drops, not being able to bring in that touchdown last week against the Chiefs, that would have been huge. Yeah. Just balls tipping off his hands at time for interceptions. Like, we've kind of seen everything in the book with Jared Cook. I mean, not being on the same page with Justin Herbert being high on that list. But, I mean, I thought, the other thing that he talked about that's been an issue is just the batted passes. And he said it's basically just because they're running so many RPOs and things like that. All the quick passing game gives the other team, that chance to kind of get their hands up and block it. So he's not worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I see that logic and I understand it. And you can't really be mad about the RPOs because the RPOs have created a lot of explosive passing plays in this offense, and they've really used that as a great weapon, something that I would like to see them do more. I mean, it just seems like almost whenever they do it, they have a really, really successful play that comes out of it. So I want to see that happen a little bit more. I'm also, I mean, it's annoying to see the batted passes. It doesn't make a lot of sense because he's 6'6", at least in your mind. But then you look at the construction of the plays and how they're trying to run it. Sometimes they're going quick. That when you're going quick, you got to have that execution. So I mean, yeah, the RPOs are an integral part of the offense. They have to stay.
Well, and I think the only thing you would look at is like, are they tipping them off in some way? Like, are they giving teams too good of an idea? And I just don't think that Justin Herbert keeps the ball enough. I mean, they're not all read options, where it's a keeper for him. It's either hand it off or throw it.
Right.
But it would be nice to see him have a little bit more of that, especially with the offense trying to convert, trying to turn these drives into touchdowns. And we saw, a design draw a couple of weeks ago. You're seeing some innovation there, but not a ton. But I thought it was interesting what he had to say. But if you guys want to vent, I think Chargers fans still kind of need a venting session. So on tomorrow's show, we're planning on getting in some voicemails. Remember, try to keep them as short as possible. That makes them have the best chances of getting them on the show. But if you guys want to get in on that action, the number is 323-524-7924. And we're trying to get every Chargers voicemail played on the show. But we have a lot more coming up this week. I mean, it's playoff time. As Brandon Staley said, the playoffs start on Sunday, and he's right, So a lot to still play for. And to make sure you guys don't miss an episode along the way, make sure to subscribe to the new Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and follow the show for free wherever you get your podcast from, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the TuneIn app, the new Odyssey app, or wherever. And you can find it on all of our social media. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports, David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalkSD, and the show's Twitter at Locked On LAC. You can also find our new at Locked On Chargers Instagram page and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But I know there's some more that we need to get into for sure, and we'll keep you updated with the latest COVID news and all of that, and including maybe talking about just like how bad this defense is and like how we got to this situation, especially with all the moving parts that we talked about. But a lot more to get into. Crossover later on in the week, so make sure you guys are back in here with us for that. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.